Yep, we're live. Okay, hello everyone, and welcome back to another Stratigoy video. It's actually not a video; it's a live stream. I'm here with Ryan. This is actually a kind of a funny situation because Ryan is right here in my house right now. You see that wonderful art painted by my mom on the wall there. But we were just way too excited, and now we're doing a live review. This is the first time we're doing a live video. It's probably looking okay-ish at best, but the insights are going to be stellar as usual, especially because Ryan has been so excited to talk about this new book. It has been leaked fully, or maybe not completely. Ryan, we're a little bit in doubt of that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we'll get into that in a bit, but it has to do with coalition. There's a lot of kind of open-ended questions, but we think we have the whole book.
yeah.
So,
Okay, so yeah, Ryan, I told you that I was going to give you the lead on this one because you know best what we're talking about here. I have the PDF file open with all the leaked images, and we're looking at the order page right now, which is the first page in the PDF that you sent me.
okay.
But before we start on all the new stuff, you kind of wanted to recap what the old book was all about, right?
Yeah, and I was thinking about making a video just over this in general, but maybe this is a great place to do it, just to kind of get it out there. Cities is a weird army, and its history in Age of Sigmar has been kind of weird. It's not the only army that used a lot of like Warhammer Fantasy Battle leftover models from the end of the world that was, but it was the only one that they kind of cobbled together in this weird ramshackle way. Like the Seraphon models, the Skaven, the Beasts of Chaos models, they're all old, or at least the old ones, but um, they stuck in their own factions. But cities, they kind of just took a hodgepodge of things and glued them all together. And a lot of people were pretty against this kind of soupification of AOS. And I think it was just meant to be kind of like originally as a not feel bad for squatting some stuff. They did get rid of a number of things. Like there was some kind of lion unit that was used to be in High Elves, I believe. They were taken out eventually. And there were a bunch of other things that were once in the Free Peoples, and they used to play like separately. But then when the second edition Cities book came out, they kind of found a really creative way to glue everything together in a way that everyone was really excited about for quite a while.
Yeah.
Now the book has gotten pretty outdated in the past, like, I don't know, year and a half of third edition. In fact, I would say that the main thing that kept him going was the Stormcast getting better, the Stormcast units that you could use as coalition, which we'll get into later, I guess. But in short, the heart of what cities was you had elves, dwarves, and humans that were basically all working together, and with a certain amount of focus on the cities that they came from, where kind of like how Slaves to Darkness used to be, second edition book, where when you chose a city, you basically had a lot of things that came along with it, not just command traits and artifacts, but also spell lore, sometimes mount traits, and of course their unique battle traits, sometimes including a coalition. So we had a way to get. You could always use Stormcast except in Har Quran, but you could get KO or Sylvaneth or eventually Daughters of Lumineth after the Broken Realms books came out, and it was super interesting how all of this like kind of worked. And the cool thing was, at the time, all of those coalition units that you brought in, not only could you take an unlimited points value as long as your drops were right, but they all got the keywords. So you actually found that sometimes you'd get more synergy out of certain coalition units in cities than you would in the actual faction. Now, there's a lot of people that are against that idea. They feel like the points should be reflective of what something does in its own book. Like Krondys is actually better in Hollowheart than he is in Stormcast. But he's an expensive model, and I actually argue he's worth his points in Hollowheart, but not worth his points in Stormcast. So you could argue that they just shouldn't have put him in Stormcast. So anyway, this is kind of the foundation for how things were. And there was a lot, like second edition, it was even more flexible than it was once we got to the third edition rules. They really kind of pulled back on what coalition was. For example, you used to make Stormcast heroes your general. In Tempest Eye, you used to be able to make KO units your general. And so they pulled that back, and therefore you couldn't be giving those guys your command traits. There were some other things that they pulled back on, but in general, it was still a pretty flexible list writing tool. And I actually found cities to be the big jack of all trades. You could kind of do anything you wanted in cities, and they had the largest range, especially once you included all the coalition stuff. So that's kind of setting the stage. Is there anything else I kind of missed there that you think is worth pointing out?
No, I think you had it all with, or you covered it all with the squatting off stuff and then merging everything together. I always felt it was kind of a pity that they've yet again not done it in this book. They keep saying that the dwarves and the elves and the humans live together in these cities of Sigmar, but there's such a big gap between all those factions. It's almost like in a time of wokeness, which I support completely. Why can humans only affect humans, and why can elves only affect elves, and why can those battalions not be mixed? This was such a missed opportunity to make regiments of dwarves, elves, and humans in the same unit. That would be so cool, and that would also, if circumvent the issue of squatting certain units, right? You could just put them proxy them as a different unit because they're elves and they all fulfill this, I don't know, city guard rule or something, city guard war scroll.
Yeah. Yeah, there was some talk of like, okay, they're squatting things for range reasons, they're old models, blah, blah, blah. Okay, but maybe they would do something like what you just said, where you could you could just say like elite foot troops.
Yeah.
And you could mix and match if you want, and maybe there'd be like a big WoW version of mixing and matching. Or if you went all elves or all dwarven or all humans, then they got a specific buff that all humans or elf units get. So where you kind of get this modularity, a little bit like Marks of Chaos. That could have been really cool. They didn't go that route. And like you said, spoiler alert on the book, they actually made it even less overlapping than it once was, which is a bummer. But we can get more into the unit stuff when we get there.
Yeah. Okay. So that's it for the old book. Now moving on to the new book. So everyone that's just watching now or watching the video afterwards, we kind of did a recap of the old stuff now, what our impressions were and what the intentions of the Cities of Sigmar were in our eyes. Now we're moving on to the leak, so the new stuff. And I have the order page open here right now. I don't know, Ryan, whether you first want to do a general kind of vibe that you have of the BattleTome right now, or do you just want to get straight into it?
Yeah, the next thing I'd kind of like to maybe mention is cities, because I think that's that was the principal idea of what's going on with the lore of this army, right? Is that, like I mentioned, it used to be, it's not anymore. It used to be that a city really kind of had an identity. Now, unfortunately, and unlike what happened in Soulblight, you made a good reference earlier that Soulblight is one of the only books left that still functions the way cities should probably work, where each dynasty or legion has their own set of everything. Now we basically just went to all 11 cities, and that's got it's its own thing that's complicated. We traded some. We basically had 11 before, and then we kind of mix and match some things, and now we're back at 11, but in a different way. They basically all just have one battle trait. There's no spell lores or anything like that. This is really kind of a bummer because it really takes away some of the identity. And they don't. None of them unlock extra battle. Currently, the understanding we have is none of them give coalition. They're just a couple buffs to allied units that would be related to those coalition armies, but it's kind of a ghost of what its former self. Yeah. The weird thing is, a lot of people were talking about, because the wind up into City Crusades, right? And obviously, the Dawnbringers is now been migrated over into the Broken Realm style books that are coming out with the Regiments of Renown. We've had the first one that had 4 different armies get a kit and a new guy and whatever. The thing a lot of people were thinking was cities would end up being kind of like what Stormcast does, where you could either have a city that's like a fixed city that doesn't travel and isn't about kind of roving bands trying to create new cities, or you could go in a direction where the new humans maybe would have been better focused, where they're kind of built to be vagrant and people who are trying to set up like settlers, literally. And that whole concept wholly not realized in these rules at all. I think maybe one of the other things to point out here is that obviously there's a whole bunch of things that got squatted in terms of model range, though GW did say you should be able to proxy a lot of things. They, however, said there was going to be a 1-to-1 ratio for almost everything, and I would argue that's not true. Like cavaliers, or sorry, what's it called? Outriders and pistoliers, I mean, don't have a function. Most of the bow units don't have a function, like Sisters of the Watch or whatever, that kind of stuff. Demogryphs, you could argue, totally gone because the base sizes, I'm pretty sure, are different than the new cavalry. That's a big problem. Free Guild Guard, in some strange reason, they didn't make a human version of an elite infantry unit. I don't know why. It's almost insane. They do have good elite infantry in the other factions, the other races, but so there's a certain number of things that got squatted, and then a certain number of things that obviously tons of new human kits. And the thing about the human kits is, I think if I were to suggest to someone thinking about what this army is now, I would say just imagine that the elves and dwarves don't exist. And imagine that this is an army out of about 20 war scrolls. I think it's somewhere in the range for humans, maybe a little bit more. It's like a new faction that happens to have the same name as before. It's all built around humans. All those units synergize really well. They look cool if you like the new aesthetic. And there's a lot of modularity or like cool things you can interact with them. But that really is what this army is. And then I would almost look at the elves and the dwarves as either you can still play with your old toys mentality, or maybe from a Lumineth perspective, this is like Huracan.
Yeah.
And this is Emetrica,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Alarth, whatever, where they're kind of there, but they're like a small set. They've got a couple heroes, they've got a couple units. There's some things you can do. It can be interesting, but it's probably not the core of your army.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, this really just feels like Cities of Humans is what it is now, and it's not even cities anymore. It's human army, which is great, But I think there's going to be a lot of people like myself that feel like what spoke to us about the army originally is no longer there.
Yeah.
Now, I think it's worth pointing out here, this is a first reaction. Just to clarify, I stayed up way too late last night and I've read literally everything in the book, but only like one time. I've also taken notes of everything that's changed on every single war scroll that previously existed. So I have a good sense for where the war scrolls changed, but I'm still wrapping my head around the order system, which is probably a good segue into that, and then in some of the other buffs that we have.
Yeah, I mean, when we talked about doing this live, this is not the style that we usually review books with. Usually we wait a bit so that we can play test it, and our layout looks good. Now it's a little bit more just put together, but we really wanted to get our first reactions out there. I have barely seen anything. I've only seen all the war scrolls, but not seen any of the army rules specifically. You've done a first pass through kind of thoroughly. I think you already understand the book better than most people do at this time of us recording and talking about it. But we will be doing another more informed review in a month maybe or so with a guest as usual when we had the chance to play a bit more, right?
Honestly, I'd like to get on next week if it's possible. Let's see
how
this
I thought you wanted
goes.
to play test it first a bit.
I'm okay with not play. The thing is, I'm prepping for other tournaments with KO right now. And for those that don't know at home, when GW releases a limited edition box that has a limited edition Battletome in it, those books don't become legal until the red bordered version of the book comes out, which means Cities isn't going to be legal for tournament play for probably a month and a half.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm focused on tournaments with my KO army and other things right now. So honestly, I probably won't get a lot of games in any case. So, but obviously there will be list writing and a lot of theory crafting, which is the same thing we do every time we do a Battletome review. So.
Yeah, so Ryan, I'm sometimes looking sideways to the comments section right now. So Van de Stormhammer has kind of agreed with you on multiple things. He mentioned that it's a human-based book, basically. Dwarves and elves are inside, but just a flavored thing. Would you agree?
Yeah, for what it's worth, a good chunk of the dwarves and elves got a big bump up. Yeah. But there's something that I wonder is, you can look at them in a vacuum. The units, a lot of them like do double the damage they used to do, which looks good on paper. But you might also say, well, look, third edition has gotten increasingly more lethal
Yeah.
with more buffs to things, more rend, all that stuff. For example, Longbeards, one of the most basic units, now has at least rend -1, if not rend -2, which is crazy for a battle line unit
Yes, it
that has a
is.
4-up save or a 3-up save.
Yep.
Pretty good. And so you kind of see this escalation, and I sometimes wonder if the buffs that some of these units got is just keeping up with the Joneses next door,
Yeah.
or if it's actually really strong. Some things
Keeping
I
up
think
with
are
the
really
Joneses
strong.
next door. That's such a cool, cool
Yeah.
metaphor. Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of comments now. Really cool. Hugo's first reaction was the Pope is cooked as fuck.
Oh yeah.
I think we
Oh
both
yeah.
agree there. Elves look good. I think people are overhyping the save stacking.
Yeah, I don't know which save stacking we're referring to right now because I've processed everything I can, but I don't know which. Maybe if he wants to follow up on that. But hi to Hugo. It's good to see him. I'm assuming that's the Hugo I know.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
David is also in the chat.
Yeah, great.
And he asks, do you guys think whether this book represents a wave one kind of deal?
So I could see two different ways of this going. I could see it either being kind of like the Lumineth temples, that they're going to flesh out the elves and the dwarves more later, because they've put a lot of TLC into those units. I'm not going to like they're not just there as kind of like whatever on the
They're not
side. I feel like
placeholders.
they did a pretty good job with them, and the
Yeah.
models aren't bad. That said, a lot of people have the theory that they're going to eventually just they're going to disappear and then go into other books or just whatever. I would like to think that this is wave one. I would like to think that there's going to be another follow-up where the dwarves get some serious love. That would be awesome. But who knows? It's too early to tell right now.
Yeah. Yeah. So Hugo kind of added to his save stacking comment of the fortified stuff, or for example, steam tanks with Mystic Shield and then the +1 save aura from the new Metalcaster.
Sure. The Steam tanks are amazing now. They're all base 2+ save, and
Nope. I think we might have lost Ryan.